So today I'll be talking about Birth of the Demonic Sword, which is a fantasy action novel written by the author Eve of Chaos. At the time I started reading this novel, I found it to be unique. Maybe it was because I hadn't read much at the time, but I really enjoyed it at the time of reading. And when I was reading it, the releases were still coming out, so I was waiting every day or every week for newer chapters, where sometimes the author will go on break and then he'll come back and drop some chapters and things like that. So that might have affected my opinion of the novel. So like I said, it's a fantasy action novel which has 2,361 chapters, and the chapters aren't too long, so it's just right for a short, not short, but relatively not too long read if you want something nice, something that's a bit better than the usual generic, I think it's called comfort food type of web novels, the same pattern. It's a bit different, that's what I'm trying to say. And yeah, it has some good things going on for it, but overall I wouldn't give it a plus or a minus. I think I would just give it a balanced score because of the elements of the story. So our story follows the main character by the name of Noah Balvan. It's a transmigration story. So in the first life, he lived an aimless, boring life, and he died of a gunshot wound at 25. And then he was transmigrated into our world, the world of the story currently. Now, the fantasy world that this novel is set in is the standard, The Witcher, Victorian-ish style of fantasy world, where you have families, you have nobles, kind of like the standard, should I say, Western, ancient world, but mixed with magical elements, obviously. He was born in a mid-level noble family, the son of a prostitute and noble, and at some point during his childhood, his first encounter with magic was when he saw his grandfather fighting off a dragon. And when he saw that scene, it gave him all the purpose he needed. Now, the main storyline of this novel is quite simple, because all his pursuits and all his dreams can be summoned into one word, and that's ambition. When he witnesses that scene, he becomes so power hungry, he becomes ambitious. That's the only way I can describe it. He wants power, and that becomes his driving force for all his actions in the web novel. So everything he does for more power, whether it be physical power or influence. But where this novel falls short, in my opinion, one of the ways it falls short, is that it focuses on physical power to the point where, the checks and balances of political powers at some point becomes irrelevant. He just becomes so powerful that he can, to an extent, ignore everything. And they do try building up the political scene later on in the novel, but at that point it's failed already, and it doesn't really work anymore. So I'll talk of the things I like and things I don't like about the novel. Now, the character interaction between the characters of the novel is something that's okay. It's not outstanding, but it's definitely not cookie cutter. It's not plain. It's not, it's not everyone singing his praises or anything. There are different characters with different goals, different aims. But I think there are extremes in this novel where the main characters, the ones with backstories, are really well fleshed out. They are well developed, but the minor characters are basically just the cookie cutter characters, the side characters, the ones praising, how it usually is in web novels, the oh my god, he's so powerful, or oh my god, I can't believe he just did this type of characters. And it gives two extremes where for a fact that besides the main characters, besides the main named characters, there's nothing really worth reading about the other side characters. And yeah, it makes it monotonous in a way. There's no a lot of depth in the story when it comes out like that. And obviously, in the name of the book, it's called Birth of the Demonic Sword. So he uses a sword as his weapon, and I kind of like and dislike at the same time how the weapon was handled, because you start off thinking, he just created the weapon where the weapon was forged, but then I don't like, this is my personal preference, but I usually don't like in a story when a weapon has a sort of human nature. It's fine for the weapon to be able to speak or maybe relate thoughts or communicate, obviously, as all good weapons in fantasy should be able to do. But when it gets to a point where the weapon has a voice and the weapon is calling its owner father, and or in some cases in anime where it's like the weapon can turn into like humans, boys, girls, whatever the case may be, then it becomes like you're blurring the lines for me between object and creature, and I don't like very much blurring that lines. This is just my personal preference though. So yeah, I like the way it was handled in the form of the creation process, the powers of it, which leads me to the power system in the novel. The power system is one of the clearest I've seen. It's 9 levels, literally. Level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And obviously, the higher you go, the more powerful you are. So I think level 7 is when a person, they call it divine, the person becomes divine. And in the previous video, I mentioned that the higher levels of Star Odyssey were similar to this, because in this novel, you cannot progress without finding your true meaning. It's called a true meaning. And your true meaning has to be something unique to you, something that fuels your desire for power. So for some, for example, their true meaning might be justice. It has to be able to summed up in one word, from what I'm getting so far. For some, it's battle. For our main character, it's ambition. For some, there are so many. For some, it might be curiosity. For some, it might be miracle, like one of the characters in the story. Personally, I prefer a ruthless main character. I like main characters like the main character of Reverend Insanity, Age of Adepts, Warlock of the Magos. Those type of characters are those I prefer, and this character does fall under the ruthless type of character throughout the novel. And I love that they were consistent with it, because he does progress individually. He does progress as a character, where from trying to kill, or it's either you're with me or against me mentality, but he does change as he meets people along his way. But he doesn't get less ruthless. He just becomes aware that he can't do everything on his own up to a point. Now, another thing I was going to talk about is the world building. Yeah, I really liked the world building of this story up to a point, because, like I said, at the time it was one of the earliest books I had read, and web novels I had read, and then it was the standard, ascent to a higher plane of existence and all. But I think a bit after halfway through the novel, the higher plane of existence that he ascended to was destroyed. And then it becomes, I think the story just goes downhill from there, in my opinion, because it becomes so repetitive, it becomes so monotonous. Then it's just him going around power, because he's fighting heaven and earth. Basically, that's the final boss. And I'm trying not to spoil much in the video, but this is like this all-powerful being that the only thing stopping this being from consuming everything is a plot hole in his power, where he has to be fair to use the power he has. And it's explained properly in the book, but in the context of things, it doesn't really make much sense. I mean, the author tries to explain it properly, is what I would say, but it's not fully explained. It doesn't make sense, because it doesn't make sense why someone who has reached that level of power would be subjected to restrictions where there's no being of greater power controlling him. The restrictions come from himself. And at any point of the story, he could have undid, played around, or even if the restrictions were in place and he had to suffer repercussions, but he could have done something to wipe out the main character and his friends or his comrades, and that would have been the end of the story. So again, there's the element of obvious plot armor in the story, which isn't unique, but I guess it's done in a subliminal way. So yeah, that's it, I guess. But yeah, it becomes very repetitive where they go around finding new people, subduing, fighting, and the battles again, it's repetitive. It's not, nothing becomes interesting after some point, because we know, okay, he's physically strong, his word has attributes of darkness and swallowing, so it's nothing, there's nothing new introduced in the story after some point, and it becomes repetitive up to the final battle. The only growth we see, or the only change we see, might be in the change of his allies around him, which provides us with some form of entertainment or some form of something new while this is going on. But back to my when I was talking about the character interactions. When it comes to the character interactions between the main characters, that is handled pretty well, I would say. And there are like a lot of epic scenes because this main character is so focused and so drived. You can see that he's willing to do anything, and that creates for some epic moments when his back is against the wall, which could also be described as plot armor. But I mean, I think both of them come hand in hand, except for some very few web novels that do it right. So yeah, and then the romance. There is a bit of romance in the story, but it's forced, I think, because the main character is presented to us as this ruthless character who will do anything to achieve his goals. But obviously, which includes leaving his girlfriend or his partner if she can't keep up with him. But obviously, if you want romance in a story like that, you would have to find a way to pull the female main character by her roots and try and make her grow stronger as much as possible, which gives something similar to I think it's Duo Dalu. I forgot how to pronounce the name. The one with the Shrek Academy and the different, where everyone is, it's not forced per se, but it doesn't really make much sense if you look at it. So that's another thing. And then she's pulled in such a way that she disappears at some point in the story and then comes back years later, almost matching the power level of the people, some of the main characters who have been progressed throughout the story. But that's my one of the gripes. I don't like the way the romance was handled. It was very, very forced, and the final battle the ending of the story was so rushed, I think. You had it was just a mess of everyone throwing different abilities, and then all of a sudden the main character has this breakthrough in power, and then he climbs to the peak, and then he takes his girlfriend and he leaves, and the story, it's kind of the way Age of Adepts ended, if any of you have read the novel, and I don't like it for that reason. So yeah, I tried to avoid spoilers in the story, as I'll continue to try to avoid them going forward. But yeah, that was my opinion of Birth of the Demonic Sword by Eve of Chaos. Now, if you like this novel, if you like this review, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to build a web novel community where we can gather and talk about the different web novels, like I said. So, thank you all and have a nice day.